Thank you very much, colleagues. Our next item of business is topical questions, and our first topical question is from Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it considers will be the impact on sport of an extended ban on public gatherings.
Minister Joe Fitzpatrick.
The Scottish Government recognises that the restrictions on gatherings have had an impact on people across Scotland and that sport has been similarly affected. And I'd like to thank the sporting sector for their understanding and cooperation. Sport Scotland are currently working with the Scottish sporting governing bodies to understand the impact of social distancing measures, including the possible need for an extended ban on public gatherings. They're looking on the short, medium and long-term impacts that the restrictions will have, and also how they, along with the Scottish Government, can help them through this period. We also appreciate the impact on community sport. Sport Scotland are currently undertaking a survey of sports clubs and groups to understand how impacts are being felt across all sports at all levels. Presiding Officer, these measures are tough, but they are absolutely necessary in order to slow the spread of the virus, protect the NHS and save lives.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Minister for that reply. Thousands of people work in sport, from Sport Scotland's national training centres, 2 of which are in my own constituency, to local golf, football and rugby clubs, etc. If the UK Government ends furlough payments and there remains a ban on large gatherings, how will people employed in sport retain their livelihoods?
Minister.
We absolutely recognise the enormous reach and impact that sport has on communities, individuals, delivering a wide range of positive social, health and economic benefits. And we want all clubs and organisations across all sports to survive this terrible pandemic. The Scottish Government and UK governments are providing a range of financial and business support. Scottish Government and Sport Scotland are working with the sector to understand what support they will need to restart their activities as soon as it is safe to do so. It is absolutely important that we get the balance correct, and it's important that discussions on issues such as the one that Mr Gibson raises are part of ongoing discussions with the UK Government.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, the Minister, for his further response. Football alone has 470,000 registered male and female players in Scotland and hundreds of clubs at every level. In 2019, it directly contributed £215 million to the economy, with social benefits worth £320 million and active participation leading to £690 million in healthcare savings. Does the Minister accept that unless football and other sports are able to restart playing soon after lockdown ends, albeit safely, some clubs could fold and many of the economic, social and health benefits to individuals and society will be lost?
Minister.
It's really important that we continue to work with all of the sporting sectors. Obviously, football, our national game, has a particularly powerful reach across Scotland, and it's not just the economics, it's much wider than that economic benefit, the social benefit, the impact on people's mental health by both spectating and participating in football and other sports cannot be underestimated. But it is important that as we take the next steps that we do so carefully in order to protect life, and that is why I and my officials are working with Sport Scotland to understand what it is that we can do to continue to support football and other sports, so as to make sure that as much of our sporting collateral as possible survives the pandemic.
Brian Whittle, to be followed by James Kelly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given the Minister's answer there, I think he agrees with me that sport, leisure and recreation activities will become ever more important as we tackle our physical, mental and emotional health. And on the back of that, can I ask what consideration the Scottish Government is given to supporting sports governing bodies, ALIOs, sports clubs and third sector organisations such as the Guides and the Scouts to ensure they are still there to support our communities when the time comes?
Minister.
So I do agree with the members that the points the member made. There's a range of support. Obviously, I already mentioned the government support in terms of both UK government and Scottish government support in terms of a business sense. Additionally, we're working with Sport Scotland, who've communicated to all Scottish sports bodies and local partners that they will be receiving 6 months payment up front for this year in order to help them through the pandemic. That's a £16.4 million payment, and also that they're relaxing the usual targets to help make sure that organisations can survive through the pandemic. But if you look at what's happening across sport, there is some absolutely amazing examples of sports clubs and hubs reaching out to their membership and doing some fantastic things at all levels, from right down to the community sports clubs right up to one of the really good examples, and it is not the only good example from football. There are many, but the decision of Hibs Football Club to put "Thank You NHS" on their strips for next year is something that should not be underestimated. The power of that commitment from the team, and also the financial commitment that will go along with that in terms of fundraising for Edinburgh and the Lothians NHS Foundation. So there's a huge amount of good work going on, and we need to continue to support that, and that's what the Government and Sport Scotland will continue to do.
James Kelly, to be followed by Fulton McGregor. James Kelly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've been approached by a number of constituents who are golfers and who have pointed out the benefits to physical and mental well-being of being able to play golf. Obviously, they're not able to do that due to the lockdown. What consideration has the Minister and his officials given to looking at golf being able to take place once the lockdown is lifted, bearing in mind social distancing can take place on a golf course?
Minister.
So Scottish Golf is one of the organisations that I'm looking to meet with in the very near future in order to discuss their particular needs. But right now it is important that we get the message out, and it's a message that's not just coming from the Scottish Government, but it's also coming from Scottish Golf, that golf should not currently be taking place anywhere in Scotland.
Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to remind the Chamber that I chair the cross-party group on the future of football in Scotland. And even the most committed football fan would agree that the entertainment side of the sport needs to take a back seat during these times. But for some of our clubs, they are much more than the football played on a Saturday. They are local businesses employing many people. They are centres for community networks and a lifeline for so many. My local club, Albion Rovers, part of the Coatbridge community for nearly 140 years, have been in touch to say that the current situation is a threat to their existence. They rely on gate receipts and possible plans around playing games behind closed doors, while may be plausible for higher leagues, will not be a solution for them. Can I therefore ask the Minister if there's a continued commitment to our clubs, particularly smaller ones like the Rovers, to support them for as long as necessary, like we have done with other businesses, and to help them through this crisis?
Minister Joe Fitzpatrick.
As I said, there's a range of support already in place for football teams and other clubs, but I think the member makes an important distinction between football in Scotland and perhaps football elsewhere, and we're seeing suggestions of changes of decisions elsewhere in the UK, which I think is driven largely by media requirements rather than sporting requirements. We have to make sure that any steps that we're taking in Scotland, while doing our best to support sport, also make sure that we're limiting the spread of the virus, continuing to protect the NHS and saving lives.
Thank you. Question number 2, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to tackle fraudsters who are targeting vulnerable people during the current COVID-19 outbreak.
Minister Ashton.
Criminals are seeking to capitalise on the COVID-19 pandemic, and vulnerable people are especially at risk at this time. Doorstep crime, scams and fraud, both online and off, are growing in number, and it's becoming increasingly important to ensure people and communities across Scotland are kept safe and resilient. So the Scottish Government is working closely with Police Scotland and other partners to encourage the public to be more vigilant about fraud, especially about sharing their financial data and their personal information. We are continuing to support our partners to help them reprioritise their work quickly and put in place resources that will help inform and reassure the public at this time. And there are a number of national initiatives that are underway. For example, Crime Stoppers Shut Out Scammers campaign has been launched to raise awareness of doorstep crime, scams and frauds, with a focus on providing advice to those who are the most vulnerable. And Neighbourhood Watch Scotland also play an important role in offering reassurance to local communities, and they've been sharing messages on potential criminal activities in the area, offering advice on keeping safe and encouraging communities to look out for one another, especially the elderly and the vulnerable. The National Cyber Security Centre is also working with Police Scotland and the Scottish Government to raise awareness of the growing number of internet scams relating to COVID. and it's very important at the moment that the public think twice before they click on links. And there are many organisations at the local and at the national level that are working on protecting the vulnerable, and the Scottish Government recognises more than ever at this time the importance of supporting our community safety partners through stepping up activity to provide advice and information during this time. But we would also encourage anyone who's been the victim of a scam to report it to Police Scotland, and that's by calling the 101 number. And we'd like to add that there's also support available to victims of cybercrime via Victim Support Scotland.
Thank you. Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Minister for that response. Despite forms of crime being down significantly, there has been a 10% spike in fraud cases across Scotland. And that has been door-to-door presentations of individuals saying they are working for the NHS and collecting funds or offering shopping for money. Clearly, these are callous acts to exploit vulnerable people. So what assurances can the Government give to allay people's fears?
Minister Ashton.
Yes, I'm grateful to the member for raising this issue. Clearly, we don't want to get in the way of genuine volunteers, at this time that are doing amazing work in the communities, supporting the vulnerable. So I think there's some clear strategies that people can employ in order to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of at this time. So if someone's coming to your door and you're not expecting them, for instance, you need to check their ID. You would then need to call the organisation that they have the identity card with, because obviously we know that sometimes identity cards can be faked. People can feel free to take some time to say thank you or no thank you and shut the door, have a think about something before they progress it. We've asked, Crime Stoppers are reprioritising their work at the moment with regard to COVID-19 issues. They've launched a central landing page on their website. So this can direct people to some of the key issues at the moment that are coming up in regards to this. And there's also an ongoing campaign to raise awareness of the COVID-19 issues, such as the ones that the member has mentioned, such as doorstep crime and other scams and fraud. And that would also provide people with targeted advice.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Minister for the response. Even more worryingly, there has been a reported increase in fraudulent HMRC texts indicating that tax refunds can be found, or fake fines for breaking lockdown, or calling individuals to offer them a vaccine trial with financial gain. These are all very devious ways of extorting funds from vulnerable people. Therefore, what further action can the Government take to put a stop to this worrying behaviour?
Minister Ashton.
Yes, we have seen a rise in a number of scams that the members mentioned, such as fake websites offering treatments and fake testing kits and so on. There's also been scams set up to trying to raise money for fake victims of COVID-19 and so on. So I think the public need to just have an awareness of these type of scams that are carrying on. Ensuring that people and communities across Scotland are safe and resilient at this time is vital. And it will play a key role in getting us through these difficult and unprecedented times. So we are working closely with our partners over this crucial period to monitor the impact of these type of COVID-19 crimes on our community safety and to prevent and deal with any emerging issues swiftly. The Government recognises the importance of supporting our national and local community safety partners and that they continue to function where possible, to step up their activity and to provide information, to provide advice and to provide reassurance during this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much. Question number 3, Ross Greer.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that thousands of people in Scotland have lost their home care support during the COVID-19 crisis.
Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
It is important to be clear at the outset that the majority of those who receive home care support have not been reported as having lost their home care packages. However, a significant number have, and I do take that matter very seriously and have considerable concern about it, given our commitment to the rights of people to live as independently as they wish to, no matter what age they are. We have taken a number of steps to assist in this. In addition to our investment of £800 million directly to social care, we have made clear that we will support additional costs incurred as a consequence of additional demand arising from COVID-19. We've also agreed, as members know, a number of actions to support social care with COSLA, including the uplift of 3.3% to all adult social care contracts to enable frontline social care workers to be paid at least a Scottish living wage. And we have a significant number of former social care staff alongside returning NHS employees who are ready to assist in terms of workforce resilience. We've been clear with local authorities that they are still expected to do as much as they can to meet people's needs with appropriate safeguarding measures in place. And my officials are in daily contact with chief officers of health and social care partnerships to hear directly from them of any concerns they have in delivering this so that we can resolve these matters as quickly as possible.
Ross Greer.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer and for the remarks made in her earlier statement. The figures published by the BBC reveal considerable regional variation across the country, with Inverclyde Health and Social Care Partnership in my region reducing its client and home care visits by over 4,500, while Angus Council increased theirs, Angus Health and Social Care Partnership increased theirs by 80. Indeed, Glasgow, one of the worst affected areas, says it's running at a reduced capacity of almost 40% in its care staff due to illness and self-isolation. So can I ask what extra support the Scottish Government is providing to those partnerships that are clearly struggling more than others to meet demand?
Cabinet Secretary.
So let me repeat, this is unacceptable to cut these social care packages, in particular because we have made it clear jointly with COSLA in a letter written jointly between myself and Councillor Stuart Curry that we would meet the additional costs that arose as a result of the demands of COVID-19 on social care packages in order to allow existing social care packages to continue to be provided as well as meet an additional demand. And as I've said, we have returners ready to be deployed into the social care workforce precisely to help with the resilience questions that Mr Greer raises. We are in direct contact with those local authorities where these packages have been cut. We are asking them to tell us what they need in terms of either resources or staffing to be deployed. I regret to say that not all of them have done that, but we will continue to press very hard that they reinstate those social care packages, bearing in mind their statutory obligations in this regard and our offers of significant support and help.
Ross Greer.
Thank you. Organisations such as the Glasgow Disability Alliance have expressed concerns about the impact of these changes, which have included some individuals having their support packages dramatically reduced and others losing support entirely, with some being forced to rely on family members for personal care, meals and medication. The potential impact on the mental well-being of disabled people, particularly in terms of social isolation, which often disproportionately affects people with disabilities, is particularly worrying. Could the Cabinet Secretary confirm whether any additional resources, particularly online and remote resources, are being put in place to provide specific mental health support to those affected?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm sure, as Mr Greer knows, GDA and other disability organisations are well known to me from former responsibilities I have, and I take very seriously the importance of enabling people to live as independently as they wish to. They have the right to do that, and those social care packages are critical to them in allowing them to do so. So we will continue to press our local authority colleagues to take up the offers of support, which are considerable, that we are making to them, and reinstate those packages as quickly as possible. I completely appreciate the impact that has on individuals, whether they are disabled or not, in terms of their mental health and well-being. There are a number of initiatives that have been put in place to support the mental health and well-being of the population as a whole, some of which may be particularly appropriate to those affected in this area. But if there is more that the GDA or others think that we can and should do, then I'd be very happy to hear from them and to consider what more action we can take.
Joan McAlpine to be followed by Miles Briggs. Joan McAlpine.
Thank you. The providers of home care support packages, including personal care, currently follow UK-wide PPE guidance, allowing them to self-assess risk as to whether they wear a mask, although confusingly the same guidance says that masks need only be worn if the person receiving the care is symptomatic or shielded. Given the criticism of UK PPE guidance in last night's Panorama, and given that the First Minister has now advised members of the public to wear masks, will the Government now publish Scottish guidance instructing carers to always wear masks, given the vulnerability of those receiving the home care? Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
So to be clear, the First Minister's advice was about face coverings and not masks. I'm not being pedantic, it is a really important point. I don't understand if home care providers are following UK-wide PPE guidance, because there is Scottish guidance. It was issued very clearly by the Royal Colleges, the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Nursing Officer. In addition, there was additional clarity provided as a consequence of a discussion between myself, COSLA and the relevant unions. And that guidance is very clear, that home care providers, home care staff should wear masks unless their professional judgment tells them that it is not necessary. So, quite rightly, we rely on the professional judgment of those home carers themselves to make that decision, but they may indeed wear masks, and we are working with local authorities and others to ensure that the PPE that is supplied meets the right standard, and where there needs to be emergency top-up, that we make sure that we provide that from our NHS stockpile.
Miles Briggs, be followed by Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wrote to the Cabinet Secretary on the 7th of April to raise the concerns of housing associations and sheltered housing properties regarding access to PPE, and I still haven't received a response. But given the pressures we're seeing in terms of the procurement around PPE across the world, can I ask what help is being given to housing associations, given the number of vulnerable people living in these properties?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the guidance that I've just referred to applies, of course, to those areas, be it sheltered housing or so on, where social care is provided. And if any of those organisations are finding difficulty, they will be either private providers or local authorities. If they are finding difficulty in accessing the level and the right kind of PPE that they require, then they are very welcome to approach us, and we will ensure that where we can provide them with that top-up supply, we will do so according to the guidance that is made. There is no reason why we would not. There is undoubtedly global demand, but as Mr Briggs will recall from the briefing that I had yesterday with the party spokespeople, we are doing everything we can to ensure not only an adequate supply, but thanks to the good efforts of my colleague Mr McKee, that we begin to increase the supply chain here in Scotland for the provision of PPE.
Monica Lennon.
Thank you. Worryingly, many care packages have been withdrawn, and almost 8 in 10 of Scotland's unpaid carers are providing more care since the COVID-19 outbreak. Carers Scotland published a report yesterday, Caring Behind Closed Doors, and I wonder if the government accepts the findings of that report, which surveyed almost 900 carers in Scotland, and does accept the recommendations, which includes a particular request for a carer wellbeing fund to be established that would enable Scotland's carer centres and young carer services to better support the needs of our unpaid carers.
Cabinet Secretary.
So I am aware of that report, and I know that the organisation has welcomed the inclusion of unpaid carers into PPE supply that I have already announced. In terms of the recommendations, we will consider them very carefully, and with my colleagues Ms Campbell and Ms Somerville, we will look at that specific request and see how we may best respond to it.
Thank you very much, and that concludes topical questions.